This is the Cubs-related podcast presented by CubsInsider.com. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan, and we are coming to you on, folks, what feels like a dire Sunday. The Cubs, similar to how they started the weekend series against the Brewers at Wrigley Field a week ago, win the first game in exciting fashion, and then it all falls off the rails. The Cubs drop 3 straight games after winning the opener on Thursday. They fall to 4.5 games behind the St. Louis Cardinals in the NL Central, and I think that if you guys will allow us, we're just going to let this podcast flow. We did not discuss any particular outline or topics because the topic is the situation that the Cubs are in, and that has a lot of different facets to it and things that we'll break down, but I think we're just going to shoot this one from the hip, Brendan.
There's no main topics right now. It's all over the place. Kris Bryant has a knee injury. Javy Báez is going to be out for probably the regular season. Joe Maddon's making dumb decisions. The depth is an issue. Maybe we have no shortstops now with Addison Russell going on. The concussion protocol, where to even begin with this? It's just been so difficult to muster up the emotions, the anger, whatever you want, right, to talk about this team right now, because this is such a systematic problem, and there's no right answers. There's tons of problems, no right answers. We have no idea what the answers are. The solutions probably won't even be fully addressed until the offseason, and it's hard to find the direction to go down right now. They're still 1.5 games up in that wild card, so there is some, optimism there, but you just don't know with this depth issue, with these injuries, how they're going to perform the next 20 games. It sucks, Corey. This truly does suck. That's the best way I can put it.
Right. I think that's the most frustrating thing, and I was reading a post about this on CubsInsider.com from Evan Altman, who we've had on a lot. And the basic premise of his piece from Sunday morning was basically that this series with Milwaukee and some of these losses is the same movie we have seen over and over and over again this season. And I think that's why it's particularly frustrating for all of us that were following this team at the end of last year, paid attention to the offseason, maybe pointed out some of these concerns, right? Like, I'm not so sure how this bullpen is going to fare. I'm not so sure that the position player depth is in the right place. How is that going to work? And it really, since the beginning of the season, it's been a lot of these same losses. Bullpen can't hold leads. The offense maybe does some damage early, but doesn't pour it on. They don't open the floodgates. They don't stick with it. I mean, think of how many times this year, guys, we've talked about games where the Cubs do good work in the first couple innings. They score 1, 2, 3 runs, something like that, and that's just it. The rest of the game is nothing. So many games where they score 2 in the first couple innings and then they get 1 hit for the other 8 innings of the game, right? It's a very familiar feeling watching a lot of these games, and you combine that with a weekend here in Milwaukee where you get not so great efforts from both Cole Hamels and Jon Lester, 2 guys who you would really look to in a series like this to be those stoppers and to play that veteran role. And Jon has done it so many times. Cole has done it so many times. And they just didn't have it in this Brewers series. And that allows the Brewers to do what the Cubs have not, which was open the floodgates and kind of break games open. And here we are. And I think it's just very easy to be frustrated with the way that these series have played out, because now you've lost 2 series in the span of 10 days to the Brewers. And
yeah,
you do so in a fashion where you win the first game in exciting fashion. I mean, when I was watching that game on Thursday, Brendan, I was so pumped to come on here and talk about that Kyle Schwarber grand slam, because we've talked for a long time now about the work that he's been doing, the adjustments that he's been making, the progress that he's been making, and how it was showing now. And at the end of Sunday, who even cares, right? Like, if we got on here and talked about the Kyle Schwarber grand slam, I'd expect half of you guys to turn this podcast off and be like, what are these guys talking about? So yeah. It's just a very frustrating spot. And again, it's tough to litigate through some of these issues now, because when we talk about the bullpen and the additions that were made, we still don't know exactly in this offseason, did Theo just not want to sign top-end bullpen guys? Did Tom Ricketts not give him the funds to do so until it became apparent that they needed Craig Kimbrell? I don't know, and I don't know that we're ever going to know, but it's very frustrating to still, in September, be talking about the way the bullpen is managed and that the bullpen can't hold specific leads. And it's just such a similar problem. And to go back to the Báez situation, even when they tendered the contract to Russell, and we went through this a million times, our feelings on it, and it's not really relevant at this particular moment, but even in signing Russell, we still wanted them to add depth and add shortstop depth, because at that time you're looking at the two guys, Javy and Russell, who you feel comfortable playing major league shortstop for this team pretty much in the entire organization, right? And here we are in a spot where Javy's not going to be able to go. First of all, that Javy has been gutting through multiple injuries. I'm sure that heel injury never really got to 100%. And it was probably only something that it's like, look, you're going to need the offseason until this is better. You need to take 4 months and sit off of it until it's better, right? So he's probably been dealing with that. Now he's dealing with stuff on his hand. I'm sure that's not even the extent of it, right? This guy is like a hockey player in the NHL playoffs. He's probably got broken bones and torn muscles that he's just been playing through because he's that kind of guy. But you're in a place now where you're in mid-September, and he's going to be unavailable. Addison Russell was hit, I think, in the face. It was hard to kind of tell. It looked like he got pretty lucky that it might have clipped a little bit of the bill of his helmet to not completely just hit him in the face. But now he's in the concussion protocol where they're checking him after the game on Sunday. He has a messed up nose now because of this, and you don't have a major league shortstop. Like, David Bodie will do a fine job. He's been more than he's done more, I think, than an admirable effort of being open to whatever the Cubs need him to do, working on those positions. We see him all the time taking ground balls before games and stuff like that. But Brendan, you're in a spot where you're not winning the division right now by 4.5 games. You're trying to stave off half the National League from taking you out of the wild card spot, and you don't have a major league shortstop on the roster. And that's just not a good place to be, and it's one that is not revisionist history on our parts or other writers and bloggers and just people on Twitter. People were asking these questions in December, saying, okay, we should probably be improving the depth. Where is the depth? Where are you filling? I mean, how many times over this offseason did you all hear me say, if you're not going to go big for Machado and Harper, that's totally fine, but fill in the cracks? And here's a big crack that's just being exposed here in the middle of September. And so I think that's where it's particularly frustrating, right? Because these were all things that I think the writing was on the wall for a long time. This season started with us banging our heads against the wall with how this bullpen was performing, how Joe was using some of these guys, and how many wins this team was just throwing in the trash because they didn't have any depth in the bullpen. And we get to Saturday on September 7th when they're losing the division, Brendan, and Derek Holland and David Phelps are pitching in the 8th inning of a 1-run, and then after Phelps blew it, a tie game. Can't be happening. Right? We're living on the edge here. We joke about this all the time. We're living on the edge of trying to not go explicit. We're saving it, all right? It'll happen. If this season continues to play out like this, it'll happen, I promise. But for now, it just doesn't feel appropriate. And so you guys just got to know we're living on the edge. When I'm talking about David Phelps and Derek Holland pitching in the 8th inning of a 1-run game when you're losing the division by 3 games, you can trust that there's a couple expletives on the tip of my tongue. And again, like, a lot of stuff happens that's out of Joe's control, that's out of the front office's control, that's out of these players' control, right? All these injuries and other things that happen, like Ben Zobrist not being available for so many months, etc. Like, some of this stuff is not within anybody's control, and blaming people or complaining about it isn't going to be that productive. But regardless of what you can and can't control, I think if I told any of you at the beginning of the year, and perhaps now this is getting into specific things that we're concerned about, Brendan, but if I had told any of you that at the beginning of the year, right, with all the expectations after the way the 2018 season ended, with everything that was going on around this team, that they would be 3 games behind the Cardinals, 1.5 games ahead in the second wildcard spot, with Almora and his .570 OPS leading off, and David Phelps and Derek Holland pitching to Christian Yelich and Yasmani Grandal in the Brewers lineup on September 7th. I think that would blow all of our minds. I think back in March, you'd be like, what are you talking about? Right? Like, what do you mean? Like, that's how this is going to play out. Like, that's just stuff where I know stuff is out of their control. I know sometimes you have a good process and the results just don't match it for whatever reason. But I don't care what the process was, Brendan. I don't care what is or isn't in your control. The way that Saturday's game in particular plays out is totally unacceptable for this team, for the expectations that they have, for the payroll that they have, and for their lack of performance in the playoffs over the last year plus.
Joe Maddon's explanation for why he went with Phelps followed by Holland, you can see the logic of what he's trying to do. The problem, though, is here's the thing. That the problem with that is that's a risky idea. You're assuming that, and it does make sense, if you get past those 2 guys, you get past Grandal, you get past Yelich, now you have Rowan Wick for 4 outs if you want to do that. I get what Joe is doing there. The problem is that was not that was not the most conservative type solution there. That was a very risky proposition to get through 2 of the best hitters on that team with 2 of your probably worst relievers in the system right now.
Well, and Brendan, just to jump in there, like, I don't care about Derek Holland's particular splits that you want a lefty on Yelich. Derek Holland was let go. This is someone the Cubs picked up off the scrap heap. He shouldn't be throwing meaningful innings like that when you are 3 games out of the division. It can't happen. And for Rowan Wick and Brandon Kintzler not to touch the ball until the lead has already been blown is just not acceptable management. I'm sorry. If you want to go down with Derek Holland on the mound, you can be my guest, right? But that was a situation where you bring in your best relievers and you either win or lose with your top guys, not guys that you picked up off the damn scrap heap that the Giants didn't want, that non-playoff teams didn't even want, all right? Like, you can look at whatever splits you want. I don't care. You shouldn't be losing games with David Phelps and Derek Holland. It's inexcusable.
Yeah, and whenever we bring up Maddon's decisions, at least, I get tweeted at by people saying, oh, well, the roster right now is in shambles and the offense is not performing. And like, yeah, I'm totally on board with those thoughts as well. But these decisions by Maddon amplify those issues, right? Like, there is perfect reason to be upset, pissed off about these moves. Like, Alberto Mora should never
I can't believe we're doing this again, Brendan. I thought we were done,
and that's what I'm trying to say. But before we go into the Almora thing, I want to point out, too, like, Maddon's bullpen management over the last 2 seasons has been scrutinized. And it's because his mindset is that of, like, a risky strategy. And we go back to that 2017 playoffs, right? John Lackey taking the hill
Brendan,
in
you're
extra
kill
innings. Me. I know I am, but you can see you'll see where I'm going with this. John Lackey in the 10th inning, whatever that was, maybe that's 9th inning, whatever. The logic Maddon said that he was using there was to get to his big eaters, the best bullpen arms, later in the game.
Right.
So he risked that. He wanted to use his guys who are not the best guys to get through that piece of the order to protect and try to get later in the game with a competitive score. That's who he is. Maddon hasn't changed his philosophy in 2 years. This is how he manages the bullpen. But it's weird, though, because there are times, even in that 2016 playoff run, where he uses Chapman multiple innings. He uses a quick hook on Kyle Hendricks. And you can have whatever idea you want with that. But Maddon, it's almost unpredictable. But the majority of the times that he goes out there and makes these pitching changes, it's a risky one. It's him trying to elongate the game to get to those relievers later on. And it hasn't worked. Derek Holland, Corey, as you said, should never, ever be pitching to the best hitter in the National League outside of Max Trout, Major League Baseball. Should never be pitching to him. That just can't happen. So when you look at all of the issues the Cubs have had this year, and you compare their record to the Cardinals and to Milwaukee, Milwaukee's outperforming their Pythag record by 6 wins. Okay, that's because they have Josh Hader, and Counsell has no issue going with Hader early in the game, and he's a fireman. He's a stopper in that regard. The Cardinals, they are right at their mark, their expected win mark. Okay, the Cubs are performing 2 games worse, but they could be not just 2 games worse. They could be at the standard average 0 difference mark, but they could be that +6 too, like what Milwaukee is doing right now. And Maddon is just unwilling, and has been unwilling to pitch those best guys early in the game. And he's waiting too long, and that can't happen. Right. So we'll see what happens in the offseason with Maddon, but I do just want to really emphasize that there are issues beyond Maddon. There are issues in the developmental system, the minors. Theo's roster is full of holes. He is fully responsible for this. He's fully responsible for bringing back Maddon, but at the same time, Maddon is really doing his best to amplify those issues. And it's okay to have different anger and frustration towards the front office compared to Joe. Maybe you're not that pissed off at Joe. That's fine. I don't really care. But that's kind of the nature of the situation. For me right now, it's on a weekly basis whom I'm most upset at. Right now, it's Joe Maddon. That was a terrible managed series against a team that was on the cusp, Corey, of being out of playoff contention.
Right.
And you threw it away.
Yeah, and
I absolutely threw that away.
And I think that you bring up a good point, and it's always good for conversations like this. And again, if this continues to progress like this over the next few weeks and maybe even months, there's a lot going on here. None of this weekend, the way the season plays out, whatever you want to look at, none of this can be laid at the feet of one person, right? You can go back to the offseason and say that the Ricketts should have spent more money. You can look at Theo and say that the Ricketts did spend enough money and he had some bad contracts that either were good ideas, some were bad ideas, and some worked, some didn't. You could say Theo did this right or wrong. You could say Joe did this right or wrong. And if you feel like it, you can just lay it all at the feet of the 25 people actually playing baseball. Right? So it's never one thing. And even one game is almost never one person's fault, right? Because you look at something like Saturday. Saturday's a good example, right? Russell has the throwing error that lets the winning run on base that ultimately scores. He also hits a home run. The offense also stops scoring at a certain point. They wasted a bases-loaded, no-outs chance with Castellanos, Rizzo, and Bryant. And they got one run that Hader walked in, right? Then you can look at the bullpen and say they couldn't hold a couple separate leads. So it's even on one game, it's almost never, right, one person's singular fault. And that's how you look at a team construction, right? This is an organization for a reason. It's not just one person. It's not just one department. It's not, again, just 25 guys showing up to play baseball. There is a whole infrastructure around them. And I think that the key to the diagnostic portion of this 2019 season, whether you're doing it now or in the offseason, whether they miss the playoffs altogether or whether they get that second wild card and win the World Series, right? You have to look at every single part and be, I think, open to saying, I think that what's going on here is good. I think that what's going on here is bad and might be a spot where we can look at some change. But it's almost never going to be one thing. And just before we keep going, here another one that I do want to make clear, because this comes up sometimes, right? Brendan and I are two Cubs fans just expressing our opinion on this. We're just talking through these things with you guys. We like to share opinions. We like to share thoughts. You guys know this. I've been open about this. I tried to work for the Chicago Cubs. I interviewed with the Chicago Cubs. I worked in multiple other front offices in different capacities. I didn't get the job, right? So I'm not sitting here saying I know better than anybody or that I could be doing a better job because I tried and couldn't, right? So I'm fully aware of that. But we're just living and breathing with this team like anybody else, and we're just talking through it. So you just see that come up, that there's kind of like a, well, Joe and Theo know better than you. And it's like, yeah, I mean, of course Theo Epstein knows better than me, right? Like, I definitely agree with that. I'm not contesting that. We're just talking through this stuff. We're just sharing our opinions. Nobody's smarter than Theo Epstein. I'm not a better manager than Joe Maddon. We're just talking through this stuff. If you want to just take what Joe says about certain decisions and take it as gospel and take it as the 100% correct answer and correct process, you can just listen to Joe's postgame, and you can listen to some of the beat writers that just say, well, here's the answer that he gave. That's it, right?
Yeah.
But you know, what's the point? Like, we're trying to have an interesting conversation, talk through these issues, and I just want to throw that out there. Like, nobody thinks they're smarter than anybody. I don't think that I could be the president of the Chicago Cubs. I tried and failed. I'm very open about that. So I just like to throw that out there because, you know, sometimes I think,
yeah, for sure,
I think that, you know, you don't want it to get taken in the wrong way. Like, we're not getting on our high horse here, like talking down to people as if we're, you know, the know-it-alls. We're just trying to make sense of it all. We're disappointed. We're sad fans at the moment, right? Like, so we're just trying to make sense of it all. But Brendan, I want to turn specifically. I have to talk about this for at least 2 seconds, right? You mentioned it already, but you have to let me just like unleash on this for
what, the Almora one?
Yes, Brendan. It's September 7th. This team is out by 3 games, 2.5 going into Saturday. But you know the Cardinals are playing the stinking Pirates, right? Who we were lucky won one of those games. You cannot lead off with a guy with a 570 OPS. He has been awful against left-handed hitters. Awful. And I asked friend of the podcast, Jordan Bastian, the Cubs writer for MLB.com, who we've had on here, does great work, you should be following. I asked him, what do you think is the logic with this? And he replied to me that they had not talked to Joe yet, but typically it's we need to get Joe Almora going against lefties like he had at times in the past, and he has good numbers in a 10-plate appearance split against Gio Gonzalez. And that was before. That was Jordan assuming this is what Joe would say. I think with the way that game played out, they didn't bother asking him. There was just too much other stuff to talk about. But I have said so often when we go on these little rants that I don't even have a problem with him playing. He's a good defender. He can give some guys a rest. It's fine, right? But to lead him off is such a laughable decision that I couldn't believe it when I was looking at it. I couldn't believe it when I went on this same rant 2 months ago, right? And then he got sent down. He hit sub 200 in AAA, gets called up, and in September, we're talking about getting him going, Brendan. With what time? Yeah. With what time are we doing this? I said this to end the last podcast, so if you dipped out before like the very end, you might not have heard this. But I said that this is just me from the stands looking at this, and I know it's not really the case, but sometimes this team plays and is managed as though they have a 10-game lead in this division, and they like almost don't realize that they might not even make the playoffs. And Brendan,
we've heard so much too the entire year about this season being one of reckoning. This season having October start in March. The theme was urgency, and to some degree they have shown urgency at times, but I don't think it's like them not being urgent. Corey, I think it's like Joe Maddon and some of these other. It's just Joe Maddon, I think, right now, identifying when to be urgent.
Yeah.
Or identifying the urgent situations has been problematic for him.
But Brendan, I thought it was big boy time.
Well,
Brendan, what's happened to big boy time?
But that's the point I'm making is like, yeah, that the intention is there. Like Joe's intention is always well suited, right? But it's identifying when to be urgent, when to push the pedal has been an issue for him. And here's another example too, before you go back into the lineup. Like John Lester in the Sunday game had to be taken out, Corey,
stayed out too long
after he gave up 6 runs.
You're right.
Because what happened? Now the game was 8-5 in the 9th inning. Josh Hader came in. It was a 3-run game, and that was it. The game was over.
Right.
So it's so easy to put a lot of the blame on the roster construction, a lot of the guys not living up to expectations, also Joe Maddon as well. But the intention seems to be there. It's just they're not executing. And the identification of these urgent situations, I don't understand how you can miss that. Like, I don't understand how you can bat Alberto Mora leadoff.
Right.
It blows my mind.
And again, this is one of those spots where you got to look at the whole thing, right? And I'm aware, like, they tried Jason Hayward. It worked. You know, he had been having a resurgent season, went into the leadoff spot. It didn't work. You've tried some of these other guys in that spot. Nothing has really caught on. So, like, that's one where I understand where Joe is in a spot where he's searching for answers, trying to make something work, which I think is, you know, a good representation of what I was saying before, where it's not a simple answer to any of this, right? There's always nuance and there's always a lot going on. But there is no time for this at all. At all. You're not going to win.
He genuinely believes that's the best option now. Like that's what I mean is like identifying urgency or identifying ways to use his players. Joe Maddon's typically been pretty good at that the past 3 seasons. This season, though, I don't know if it's a new cast of guys. It's just an unfamiliarity with his bullpen or even the skill set of some of these players after the scouting reports have changed. But for some reason, it seems like this year in particular, Corey, this year seems like Joe is just not using the guys in optimal situations. I don't know what the numbers are with that, but it just feels that way. And we never had these conversations in years past. We were always pretty emphatic that Joe would find guys the right matchups. He would find them the right opportunities to play. And a lot of them flourished, especially in that 2017 year when Ian Happ had a great year. A lot of the guys found their roles, their niche, and by the second half, it all clicked. Like, it took Joe a little bit, but it all clicked in the second half. This year, I don't know what's going on. I'm at a loss.
Well, and we've given Joe credit before in the past for pushing through some stuff that felt a little uncomfortable, right? Like the only way that the Cubs figured out that they could get a year's worth of pretty quality relief from someone like Brian Dunsing was because Joe threw him out there. When he first joined the team, he was like, look, let's try this out. Let's see what we got. Right? And early on...
He was pretty bad, too, for the first few weeks.
And early on,
I remember,
it made a lot of us uncomfortable, thinking, you know, what's going on with this guy? And then by the end of the year, you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm glad that Joe stuck with that and tried to push through that and see what we have, because now we've got a...
I mean, even Kyle Ryan this year, to a degree. Like, I think there were moments when even I know you, too, were like, you know what? I don't think Kyle Ryan can be pitching in the 7th or 8th inning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, when he's not out there, we're like, what the hell? Why is he not out there? So to some degrees, he has identified good and accurate ways to get the best out of some of these guys.
Well, and so my
the
point
majority
with that
seems
was,
to be not the case.
Yeah, my point with that was that that's all fair and good, but you have to know when to say, like, and this is what's so frustrating about it, is he did say this. I'm about to quote him, which is so frustrating. It's like, you have to know when it's time to shut down those experiments, stop playing around with guys that have been inconsistent over the past couple seasons or just this season with their career, and go to your big boys, right? Like, you have to know when that moment is. And again, like, I am willing to give everybody the benefit of the doubt on anything. There's so many things going on in that clubhouse with injuries and usage and things like that that we don't know about. We can't know about. Brendan and I would never pretend to speak from a place of knowledge or insight on certain things. But again, I don't care what any of that is. If you are in a spot where you are blowing the division like they are, letting the Cardinals now build up, what is this, the biggest lead that they've had all season?
No doubt. Yep.
You cannot be going down with Derek Holland and Albert Almora and David Phelps. It can't happen. And you brought up a perfect counterexample. Craig Counsell is not losing games with Josh Hader sitting in the bullpen. Craig Counsell is going to break off Josh Hader's arm before they lose games that are close and winnable. And that's what the Cubs need to be doing.
And that's why they outperform a lot of those expected win numbers we always see.
Brendan,
there's a reason to the madness there.
Throw Rowan Wick for 3 straight games. You have to do it. Throw Kinsler out there more. Wilson, I know he can't be playing every day. I know he's coming back from an injury, but the way that his bat looked when he came back, for him to sit in 2 of these games, there's no time for this. Brendan, if he's going to hurt himself, then obviously don't play him. But if you're just being cautious for the sake of being cautious, you don't have the time for it. These losses are burying the season, Brendan. It's just one of those things where this feels more dire than they seem to be acting like it is. And maybe there's just so much going on that it just is the way it is. I don't know. But to see some of these lineups, to see some of the guys that are getting playing time and being asked to perform in high leverage spots, just guys, there's no time for this. This needs to be the best 9 position players or best 8 position players every day, plus the starter, and riding your good relievers until they have nothing left. Nothing. But to be turning to some of these other guys in these spots, this is what you get, man. This is what you get when you have David Phelps and Derek Holland trying to shut down Christian Yelich, for Christ's sake. This is what you're going to get, and you just don't have the ability to do it. And again, it's all to say you can put that on Joe for the way he's using the guys. You can put it on Theo for putting Derek Holland on the roster. You can go any which way that you want, right? But it doesn't matter. All that matters is that it's not a position the Chicago Cubs should be in. This is not a conversation that we should be having, but here we are. So I think that's kind of the rant on the weekend. I'm not really sure I have anything else to say on that. I mean, just overall, the offensive performance, super frustrating, once again. I think for them to play the way that they did in the first games of these series, the one at Wrigley Field and the one at Miller Park, I think we all went into the rest of those series feeling like they were going to be big weekends for the Cubs. They were going to be kind of statement series wins, put Milwaukee out to pasture and out of everybody's mind, and get ready for these last few weeks and ultimately these 7 games with the Cardinals. And you just have the opposite happen afterward. They just show no ability to have that relentless offensive approach that really gets these starters on the ropes. You have Gio Gonzalez, who has ERA above 5 against every other team in the league, but an ERA sub 2 against the Chicago Cubs. Again, we're talking about all of this stuff, Joe, Theo, the players, and when I say everything needs to get your scrutiny when we're looking right now or in the offseason, I mean everything. And I'm talking about the rest of the front office, the way that they're drafted, the way that they're developed. I've tweeted a few times, but you got to look at people like Jeff Greenberg and the pro scouting department, because I look at these games, and I think you do too, Brendan, and there's a lot of games where it doesn't look like they're particularly well prepared for a starter that either has no experience or is getting killed by the rest of the league. Gio Gonzalez, Ivan Nova, Lambert on Colorado, who makes 2 starts, his first 2 starts against the Cubs, dominates them, and then is getting killed by everybody else afterward. This happens way too much, and so it's all just to say, again, it's not ever one thing. It's a whole team, a whole process, a whole organization for a reason, and you can kind of lay lay the bits of blame wherever you want. It's like that scene in The Office where they're voting and they're placing the beans on the people's picture, right? Like you have 20 beans of anger. You can put them wherever you want. Like, I don't care. Just try to figure out where they deserve to be, I guess. But it's all just to say this was a very frustrating weekend. You really felt like it started on a great note. That Kyle Schwarber Grand Slam should have been the moment of the weekend, right? That just started a brilliant weekend for the Cubs to get them positioned against the Cardinals, get a little more safety in that second wild card spot. And again, like I was talking about with that piece from Evan, it's more of the same. Bullpen can't hold leads. Your starters can't protect those leads. They give them right back. They can't give you quality starts. And the offense disappears. And so here we are. And I was actually just watching the post-game live with Kelly Cruel and David DeJesus on NBC Chicago following the game on Sunday. And I thought that David DeJesus put it pretty simply and pretty well in saying, I think we all know, as you and I, Brendan, have been saying a lot throughout this season, I think we all know this team has talent and has the ability to get hot and go on a run and perform well. But with what we've looked at over the last few months and few weeks especially, what are we counting on? Right? How comfortable do you feel on counting that that's going to happen? And I'm like you, Brendan. I don't really know how on the ledge I'm willing to go for this team, and how much I'm really willing to stick my neck out, because at this point it feels like you're asking for something that just isn't happening and is not what you are watching. And I think sometimes you have to be able to step back and say, this is the reality of the situation. This is how this team has played for a long time. We've read those splits about how, they have been close to 500, a little above, a little below, depending on when you're looking, for 100-ish plus games. This is not some recent thing. This is not some fluke. This is who this team is. And can they get it right at the right time and do damage? Yeah, I still believe that to a degree, but is that going to happen? I don't know. I think you would be it's pretty risky, I think, to just totally believe that's going to happen, because at some point, when a team shows you who they are, you got to believe them at a certain point.
Yeah, and two other housekeeping notes before we wrap up here and preview the upcoming series. First note, Yu Darvish went 5 innings, first start after skipping his last one due to forearm tightness, so he took 10 days off. Came back, looked really good, Corey. Looked like classic Yu Darvish, throwing 95, 96, 97, showcasing arguably, 10 pitches. There's controversy about that, but he looked good. Only went,
there's only
72
controversy
or 70
from jerks, so.
Sure, yeah, we'll go with that. I think he threw around 75 pitches. You can, check me on that if you want. But regardless, could not go past 5 innings. They want to protect his health, his stamina going down the stretch. But looked good, so good to see. Second housekeeping note, Kris Bryant. I wanted to get your thoughts on that in terms of what the Cubs should, or rather what you want to see them do going forward. Bryant went into Maddon's office after Saturday's game and said he can't play. Says it's his knee injuries affecting every facet of his game, his base running, his fielding, his hitting. Maddon in particular said that Bryant's having issue with his balance and on his follow-through swing. So that sucks. That's not what you want to hear from the best player on this team and one of the better, most talented players in professional baseball. He's been dealing with this injury since the All-Star break, even probably before that. And he's come back once early on in August after taking a Sunday game off. He came back over the next 50 plate appearances with 4 home runs, batting over 300 and looking pretty good. Unfortunately, after that August stretch in mid-August, the knee barked up again, which has led to a current point where now you don't know if it's going to heal. And he even, Bryant even said, this is not going to heal this year. He said that. He has to wait till the offseason for this to fully heal. So with that in mind, what would you want to see the Cubs do? Do you want to just say, hey, you know what? Take a week off. Take 10 days off, whatever. Or do you want them to go on a day-by-day basis, and when Bryant's feeling, okay, still play him, but risk the possibility of him not playing consecutive games, or risk the possibility of not getting peak Bryant performance for the rest of the season? Where are you with that? For me, here's where I am. I know we have to be urgent. They're 4.5 games back. I know we're only a game and a half up on the division, but when Bryant's been playing through this injury and doing these off days every other 3 or 4 days or so, the performance has not been there. And we've gotten to a point where it's been almost 3 months now, and it's not healed. And he hasn't had extended time off outside of those few days in the All-Star break. I think where I am right now is you got to rest him for a week, 2 weeks. I know it sucks, Corey. I know it does. But right now, is he truly a truly better option than Ian Happ playing every day? Like, is the margin of error so in Kris Bryant's favor where playing Ian Happ on a healthy level is worse than that injured Kris Bryant? I don't know. I don't think that's the case right now. So I'm at the point where you got to rest Kris Bryant so maybe you can get the best out of him in the last 12 games, in the last 10 games. And for those next 10 games, go with Ian Happ, who's healthy, who's been pretty good in his limited playing time. Go with David Bodie at third base if Russell can be healthy. Bodie's been pretty good too his last 40 plate appearances. He's batting over 400. Made some adjustments. Maybe that's working. I'm at the point where Bryant needs to sit for a week, 2 weeks, until you can get 75% of Kris Bryant, not 30%, not 20%, where he can't keep his balance. That can't happen, Corey.
Right, and I think that this is also a good point to mention. Like I always say, like I don't really have a dog in this race. I just want the Cubs to win. This is a good example. Like we're not going to sit here and rag on Descalso and Almora all year and then just pretend like Kris Bryant is fine. Like he's not, and there's different reasons for all of this, but when you're in a situation like this, at the very least, whether you want to rest him completely or whatever, you have to act like he's not hitting like himself. That's the key. And so if you want to rest him, that's fine. You want him to, if you can get to a point where he can be a little more comfortable at any point in the season, I think that's what you should be striving for. But at the very least, and we saw this when he moved to the 5-hole, like you have to acknowledge that he's not hitting like himself. You can't just keep throwing him out there in the 2-hole, the 3-hole, the 4-hole, whatever, as if he's performing like himself, because he's not. You just have to be willing to admit that. And it's so obviously because of this knee injury. The timing of it is exact when you look at some of how his stats have rolled and things like that. But at the very least, you have to acknowledge like this guy is not healthy. He is not performing at his peak level. So move somebody like Kyle Schwarber is hitting the cover off the ball. And we've seen him move up in the order. You got to keep doing that with some of these guys. And like you said, Bodie's been playing better. Get him in there. Get him higher in the order. Wilson looks really good since he's come back. Get him in there. Get him higher in the order. Like you have to be, again, I think it all goes back to that urgency, right, Brendan? Like you have to be looking and going, Kris Bryant is not right. Okay, whether we can fix it for this year, whether it's not going to be fully healthy till next year, I don't know. You have to deal with that internally. But you have to approach every lineup and make it the best that you can. And if he's not right, you have to act accordingly. And sometimes, again, with other things, it just takes the Cubs too long to make these decisions. So I don't know, man. It's a real mess. So
are you with me then? You want to give Bryant
if they think,
elongated
if
rest?
they think that he can get to a point where he's comfortable for the final couple weeks and not dealing with this as much, then yes. But if it's one of those things where it just is what it is, then, I don't know. Maybe try to get him in there and just move him down the order and see if he can get more comfortable. I don't know.
But we know what they've been doing.
It's a bad situation,
But we know what they've been doing by giving him an off day every 10 days. It hasn't worked. That has not worked. He's been the same for the majority of this stretch, the same guy that he was with that knee injury in July.
Right.
He had that one small, 10-game stretch that I just said, and that maybe does give more reason to go with what they're doing right now, with giving him an off day every other day. Maybe that does make the most sense. But, if there's no, I don't want to overstep my boundaries here with this medical stuff, but it doesn't seem like their current way is fixing the issue. It seems like the knee injury has been the same as it has been for the last 2.5 months. So try something different, right? Like give him more rest. And not only that, is beyond even getting KB right, which of course you want him to be right. It's the fact that he's not a productive player with this knee injury, and no one should be. Imagine trying to play with a knee that's like having you not able to balance yourself. That's an insane task to do on a major league level. So at the very least, even if the knee won't be where he wants it to be after a week, I just don't have the confidence right now that Ian Happ is a worse possible solution than an injured Kris Bryant. I can't get myself to think like that.
Yeah. So the only other thing I want to say before I let you preview this series, well, it's two things. First of all, again, like, this is a weird spot, right? Because they are still chasing a playoff spot, and I will never throw a season in the garbage when there's a chance to be in the playoffs. If you can get in, you can line things up how you want. You've always got a chance to mess around. So as I've said a million times, like, we're either riding this train to glory or we're going down with the ship. Like, but the Cubs related podcast is never going to start writing off a season or anything like that when there's still a chance, no matter how pissed off or concerned or whatever we are. So it's a weird spot because this has been extremely frustrating. These 2 weekends with the Brewers, I mean, are really enough to make you want to just, like, take a bat to the TV or computer that you're watching a game on. But we got to press on, at least for a little bit here, right, before we can, like, fully unleash and break this thing open and figure out what's going on. But the other thing that I wanted to say, and we touched on it a little bit, but, like, I assume he's a friend of the podcast. I assume that Javy listens to every episode. And I just want to throw out there that it's gut-wrenching that he suffers this injury and is probably not going to be out there for the rest of the regular season, maybe even beyond that if they do make the playoffs. He is truly the heart and soul of this team. He's one of those guys, he would take bullets out there for the Chicago Cubs, for that C on his hat, and for all of us fans. And it's terrible that this is how his season is possibly going to end. And just to put it out there, I think he knows this, but just to have one more voice out there saying this, Cubs fans we love you, Javy Báez. We are very grateful for everything that you do for this team and the fact that you are willing to lay your body on the line for this organization. So it's a shame to be in this spot and that he won't be there to try and lift this team up over these last few weeks. But he is the heart and soul. You could argue, while he isn't the captain, he might be the face of this Chicago Cubs team. And we thank him for everything that he's done. And if this is the last that we see of him on the field in 2019, it's been a pleasure as always, Javy. And we thank you for what you've done. And it sucks, man. But I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay, we're finishing this episode off on a pretty sad note, but it is what it is. All right, so let's preview this 4-game set in San Diego. Of course, what a great time, Corey, for a West Coast trip,
best.
Right? They will be in San Diego for a Monday night game that starts at 9:10 p.m. Central. We have Hendricks on the mound for the Cubs, who is 9-9 with a 3.39 ERA. Quantrill for the Padres, 6-6 with a 4.57 ERA. On Tuesday, same start time, 9:10 p.m. Central. We have Q on the mound, 13-8 with a 4.0 ERA. Bolaños on the mound for the Padres, 0-1 with a 3.00 ERA. On Wednesday, another late one, the same 9:10 p.m. start time. We have Cole Hamels on the mound for the Cubs. He's 7-6 with 3.95 ERA. For the Padres is Paddock with an 8-7 record, a 3.54 ERA. To finish off this 4-game set on Thursday, a day game, a 2:40 p.m. Central start time. Darvish on the mound, 5-6 with a 4.12 ERA. And you can get tickets to this series through SeatGeek with millions of live event tickets and a price match guarantee. SeatGeek proves there's a better way. Why is SeatGeek better than the rest? A quick look at the App Store shows over 50,000 5-star reviews. How is that for customer satisfaction? It's just a better process. SeatGeek pulls together millions of tickets from all over the web. Then it rates each deal on a scale of 1 to 10. Finally, SeatGeek displays them on an interactive Very easy to use seat map. SeatGeek breaks down the details. On that map, green dots mean good deals. Red dots mean overpriced deals. And every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets with confidence. I had the SeatGeek app on my phone, and it's by far the fastest and easiest way I found to shop for tickets. I used SeatGeek to find tickets to Wrigley Field a few weeks ago. I was going to go to the San Diego series, but I just can't muster the energy to go through a potential loss. But again, several really good tickets available for this weekend in San Diego. If you're looking for a vacation, if you're in the area, you can get tickets for $15 at the lowest in San Diego. Even better, SeatGeek will give you $10 off your first purchase. All you need to do is use our promo code. Download the SeatGeek app today and use promo code CubsRelated for $10 off your first purchase. That is promo code CubsRelated for $10 off your first purchase. Please, if you are in San Diego, the Cubs need as much energy that they can possibly get. And tickets are at an all-time low there. Do yourself a favor. Use our promo code CubsRelated. Get tickets to that series. Corey, what I'm looking for is simple. Win, 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 and win. No more Alberto Mora at leadoff. Get Schwarber up in the order. We saw him bat second. We saw him bat in the top of the order a few more times than we've seen in the past. Castellanos has been batting third because KB is out. Wilson Contreras getting back up there maybe in a cleanup spot since KB might be out again. Other than that, top to bottom, Zobrist, Castellanos, Schwarber, Rizzo, Contreras, those guys have to be your top five almost on a daily basis. I don't know what type of shape Zobrist is in, if he can handle an everyday role, but those at-bats against Milwaukee were phenomenal, professional at-bats. I want him in there every damn day, Corey. Again, I don't know if he's capable of doing it, but I don't care. Get the guy in every single day.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple, man. You got to win. There's no time for, I don't care who performs. I don't care where they perform, when they perform. They got to win games. They're in a spot where there's no time for anything else. You have really played yourself into a tight spot. We saw, as the months drew on with this 2019 season, that this was going to be possible, that no one of those top three teams in the NL Central was really distancing themselves, and so you knew that you were going to be in for a tough last couple months, and one where it was going to come down to streaks and who was playing better on those margins, and it's not the Cubs right now. So you've got the time, you're in a playoff spot right now, and you need to do everything you possibly can to hold on to it. So like you said, it's not a great time to be heading out west. The Cubs have had very poor luck, showings, whatever, in San Diego in years past, but they're going to have to turn it on. They're going to have to show up, and they're going to have to win games. So it's really that simple. That's just the point of the year that you're in. That's the situation that the Cubs are in, and the one that they have played themselves in. This is the situation this team deserves to be in with the way that they have played. They unfortunately, this is what they deserve. They're not going to get bailed out by everyone else in the NL Central being worse than them, and it doesn't look like they're going to get bailed out by nobody else coming for that second wild card, because there certainly appear to be teams that are quite hungry for it. So they're going to have to show up over these next few weeks. And before I sign off, I will leave you with the words of Joe Maddon, the manager of the Chicago Cubs, and he says, quote, and he said this today on Sunday, "There's only one way to deal with moments like this, and that is in the moment. Anxiety lives in the future. You've got to stay right here, right now. Things can change just as quickly. So, whether you believe that or you don't, we will be here to break it all down with you after the Cubs finish in San Diego, and we will be here with you breaking it all down twice a week, all through the season, whether it goes well or whether it goes poorly. We will be here talking to you. So we thank you for listening to the Cubs-related podcast. We will talk to you soon. And whether things are going well or this team makes us want to pull our hair out, we will always end this show by saying, Go Cubs.